Okay, monthly video time. So this month is on sand casting. So what is a sand casting? A sand casting is essentially nothing more than you take a replica of the part you want to produce. We'll call that a pattern, and you embed that in wet sand. Let it sit there, let that sand dry. You pull your pattern or replica off the sand, and you fill that cavity that you made with hot molten metal. Hot molten metal freezes, you pull it off, that's your part. It's a replica of your pattern. Pretty simple, right? Well, actually, there's quite a bit to it when you do it in production. Let's start with the patterns. So patterns are usually, they can be wood, they can be aluminum, they can be printed plastic. They're usually put on a plate, and there's a top and a bottom. They call it a cope and a drag. They can be in two pieces. The cope and drag can be separate. Or it can be on one plate where you could have a top and a bottom. The reason for that is, say you have a part. This is let's call this the pattern, the replica. You're embedding that in sand. You've got to pull it out. So you got a top and a bottom of the part. You're not going to be able to get all this. If this is just one box and there's no parting line, you have this embedded in sand, you pull it off and you just ruin your whole impression. But if you have it only halfway down and one pattern has one and one pattern has the other half, you open up the box, you pull this out, you close the box again, and then your mold has two sides to it. You can pour your metal in. So that's what the patterns are. And then there's the molds. The molds is basically a sand box. It's a box full of sand that your pattern makes an impression in that sand. Now there's several types of sand. There's green sand foundries. Green sand is basically sand mixed with clay, and you can see how that would set. And you put your pattern in there and it sets, dries, pull it up. It works well. It's a coarser finish on your part. Your tolerance will be looser. If you ask for 5 inch, you may be 5 inches plus 1/8 of an inch or minus 1/8 of an inch. It's going to come in somewhere like that because this sand still moves around a little bit. There's air set, which is sand that has chemicals in it that holds it in place, holds it a little bit better, but then there's chemicals involved. So you got your patterns and you got your molds. Molds basically is a box full of sand. So then you got to pour your metal. You can use any kind of metal almost for sand castings, aluminums, irons, gray irons, cast irons, steel, stainless steel. So you have a few things you've got to do to your box of sand in order to actually, you have to have a cup. So when you got this closed box with a cavity inside, you have to have a cup so the material can get down there. You have to have risers on it because the way the material freezes on any casting process, there's a pattern to how it's going to freeze when you pour it. And you don't want it to freeze too fast, otherwise the material won't get all the way down to the other end of the part. So you put little risers on there and keeps a nice thick cross sections in it so that it doesn't get too skinny and freeze. There's vents so that the gases can escape and you don't have that in your casting. So you set all that up, you pour your material, it hardens, open it up, extract your parts, and then you got to cut off your cup, your riser, and your gates. And clean up the part in general. A little bit of grinding usually a sand blast, and you got your parts. Here's some samples of the green sand part, which you got here, which is kind of coarse, but it's good enough for a lot of applications. It's definitely the least expensive. Anyway, I hope that was interesting to you. If you hung on there this long, it must have been a little bit interesting. Appreciate you watching. Have a good